Girl mode. Picture a contract so absurd you laugh before finishing the first paragraph. That's what happened to me. The paper looked counterfeit. A search for the company turned up nothing at all. And the sum they were offering dwarfed anything I'd ever seen in my own account. The catch was a single condition, stretched across an entire year. I couldn't tell a soul about the agreement, and from the moment my signature dried, I had to live every day, no exceptions, no loopholes, no early exit, in what the paperwork called girl mode. Break it once, and I'd forfeit every dollar and owe 10 times more besides. I assumed it was an elaborate joke. I kept waiting for hidden cameras for someone to jump out and yell gotcha. Instead, the stranger across the table just smiled, slid a pen toward me, and said the sentence that still echoes in my skull every time I catch my reflection. The contract doesn't change who you are. It only changes the life you're about to experience. I should have stood up and left. Instead, I signed. My phone buzzed before I'd even risen from the chair. Bank balance updated. Every debt gone. Rent covered for the year. Car loan erased. A cushion left over big enough to rebuild a life on. That's when it stopped feeling like a prank. The car waiting outside already had my name on the manifest, or rather, the new name printed on an envelope sitting on the back seat. Inside, a driver's license, an employee badge, bank cards, a schedule for the following morning, all of it identifying me with a feminine presentation. The photo was unmistakably me, just with soft makeup and hair longer than I'd ever grown it out. I sat with it in my lap for a full 5 minutes trying to make sense of how it could exist at all. Home was stranger still. The apartment looked like mine, mostly, except my closet had been quietly rearranged. Dresses, skirts, jeans, sweaters, jackets, shoes sorted by color like a display window. Cosmetics sat lined up by the bathroom mirror. Even my photo gallery had been rewritten. Birthdays, coffee shops, parks, a vacation, all showing me in outfits I had zero memory of wearing, and all of them utterly convincing. I told myself there had to be an explanation, hidden reality show, elaborate hack, vivid dream. Then I found a card on the kitchen counter. Resisting the experience will only make it harder. I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. The next morning I decided I wasn't playing along. Oldest hoodie, jeans dug out of a storage box under the bed. Before I even reached the door, my phone lit up. Contract violation warning. I laughed out loud. Seriously? Then, first warning issued. Return to agreed presentation within 15 minutes. The elevator doors opened anyway, and the elderly woman from the 4th floor gave me a once-over and asked if I was feeling all right. That's not really your style. As though she'd known me for years, though we'd never spoken. Downstairs, the security guard waved and said I was looking different. Was everything okay? Every person I passed treated the feminine version of me as simply, unremarkably normal. The hoodie started feeling heavier than fabric should. 10 minutes remaining. I tried ignoring it. 5 minutes later, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating, and against every instinct, I went back upstairs, changed into the simplest thing hanging in the closet, brushed my hair the way a tutorial saved to my phone suggested, and looked in the mirror. The buzzing stopped instantly. That was the unsettling part, not that I looked unrecognizable because I still looked like me, just shifted. My body hadn't been altered overnight. Everything around it had. The expectations, the records, the opportunities, the way people reacted. Week 1. Work delivered the first real test. My badge claimed 2 years of employment. Coworkers greeted me like clockwork. My manager thanked me for covering last week's presentation, a presentation I had no memory of giving, though the slides on the conference room screen were, apparently, mine. I braced for disaster. Instead, once I started talking, the information simply came. Not because anyone had rewired my brain, but because every file, every email, every calendar entry had already been laid out for me. The contract hadn't handed me new skills. It had handed me a different life to step into. At lunch, a coworker asked if I was still entering the weekend fashion challenge we'd apparently discussed for weeks. I nearly choked on my drink. That evening I tore through every drawer in the apartment hunting for cameras, for microphones, for something. What I found instead were journals, pages and pages in handwriting identical to my own, describing friends I'd never met, restaurants I'd never eaten at, Funny stories, embarrassing moments, private goals, little notes to self about being braver. Reading it felt like eavesdropping on a parallel version of my own life. I couldn't stop until I reached the final page, where the handwriting shifted into something unfamiliar. One line, "You're finally here." I hadn't written that. A chill went down my spine, and I slammed the journal shut. My phone rang, unknown number. The same calm voice from the contract meeting, no introduction needed. "Congratulations. You've completed your first day." I want out. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." A pause. "Did anyone reject you today?" I thought about it.
No.
"Did anyone laugh at you?"
No.
"Did anyone tell you that you couldn't succeed?"
No.
"The hardest part wasn't the clothes," he said. "The hardest part was realizing how many of your limits only existed because you believed in them." The line went dead before I could respond. That should have been the moment I packed a bag and vanished. Instead, I found myself looking back at the mirror, not because I suddenly loved what I saw, but because, for the first time since signing, I was curious what came next. The checkpoint. Another envelope waited outside my door the following morning. No stamp, no return address, just my new name in elegant script. Inside, a single card. Week 1. Adaptation begins today. Beneath it, an address and a time. No logo, no explanation. Every sensible instinct told me to ignore it. An hour later, I was standing in front of a glass office tower. The receptionist smiled the second I walked in. "Right on time." "I think you have the wrong person."
No.
"You're exactly where you're supposed to be." That phrase was becoming disturbingly familiar. She handed me a visitor badge and pointed toward an elevator whose doors opened before I'd reached them. It climbed to a floor absent from the directory downstairs, opening onto something closer to a private lounge than an office. Soft lighting, shelves of books, a coffee machine that probably cost more than my old car. Only the man from the contract was there, unchanged, not a wrinkle, not a gray hair, as if time had simply declined to touch him. "You came," he said. "I came for answers." "Fair enough." I refused the coffee. "What is this place?" "A checkpoint." "For what?" "To see whether you're adjusting." "I'm not adjusting. I'm surviving." "There's a difference." He leaned forward. "Before signing, how often did you avoid opportunities out of fear of being judged?" I didn't answer. "How many conversations did you never start?" Silence. "How many dreams stayed dreams because you told yourself you weren't ready?" The questions landed harder than I wanted to admit. He wasn't talking about clothes anymore. He was cataloging every excuse I'd made for years. "I didn't sign up for therapy." "No," he said evenly. "You signed up for perspective." He slid a tablet across the table. A progress bar read 3%. 3%? After everything? What happens at 100? You'll find out. I'm asking now. I know. But if I told you, you'd spend the rest of the year chasing the ending instead of living the middle. He stood. "Our meeting is over." Building a reputation. Outside, my phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Networking event. Attendance required.
Of course it did.
The venue was one of the city's fanciest hotels. Chandeliers. Effortless confidence radiating off everyone in the room. None of it radiating off me. I nearly turned around. Then, avoidance detected. Even the phone was judging me now. I went in. Within minutes, someone was gushing about my design work. "My what?" "You really are humble," he laughed. For the next hour, strangers referenced campaigns, projects, awards I had no memory of earning, an entire reputation the contract had quietly constructed around me. What unsettled me wasn't that people respected this version of me. It was how quickly I started living up to it. Someone asked for advice, I gave it. Someone wanted feedback, I offered it. 30 minutes in, I caught myself mid-sentence and realized this wasn't me, or rather, not the me from a week earlier, who would have been hiding near the snack table until the whole thing ended. Walking out, I caught my reflection in the glass doors and, for the first time, didn't look away. Not because I suddenly loved the image, but because I recognized a confidence that hadn't been there before. The runway. The following weekend's assignment, a charity fashion show. I nearly deleted the notification on principle. There was no alternate option. Backstage was bedlam, garment bags, clipboards, people who treated me like I'd done this 100 times. "You're next." I've genuinely never walked a runway in my life. The coordinator blinked, certain I was joking. No amount of explaining changed her mind. 5 minutes later, I stood behind a curtain with music thudding through the hall and my pulse louder than the announcer. One step. That's all it would take, into a room full of strangers. Every nerve told me to bolt. Then I remembered the man's question. How many opportunities had I already let pass? Too many. The curtain opened. I took the step, then another. The lights swallowed every face into blur. For a few seconds I forgot how to breathe. Then nothing bad happened. No laughter, no whispers, no pointing. Smiles. A little applause. By the time I reached the end of the runway, my hands had stopped shaking, and I walked back with more confidence than I'd started with. "See," the coordinator said backstage, thumbs up. "Told you you'd do great." If only she knew. That night, a new package brought no money, no prize, just a handwritten note. "You completed Challenge 1. And, underneath, most participants quit before this point. Participants. Plural. Which meant I wasn't the first. The search. That sentence hijacked the next morning entirely. Until then, I'd assumed I was the sole subject of some bizarre, custom-built experiment. Now I knew there were others, real people who'd signed the same contract, followed the same impossible rules, and apparently faded out before the finish. The real mystery wasn't whether they existed. It was why not one of them had ever talked. I spent the whole day searching online. Nothing. No company records, no leaked documents, no forum posts, no complaints, as though the contract had scrubbed itself from history. Every phrase I tried, 1-year identity contract, girl mode challenge, secret lifestyle experiment, dead-ended in silence. That silence rattled me more than any answer could have. That evening, library. 7:30 p.m. No explanation, no option to decline. Curiosity won again. The library looked utterly mundane, families, students, retirees with newspapers. I found the aisle from the message. History, shelf 23, book 12. Instead of pages, an envelope was tucked inside, containing a brass key and a note. Basement locker 19. No cameras, no phones, no witnesses. Every horror movie I'd ever seen replayed in my head. I went down anyway. Locker 19 held not cash, not another contract, but a worn notebook, its cover scratched from what looked like months of being carried everywhere. The first line, "If you're reading this, you're still in the game." I looked around. Nobody. I kept reading. "I don't know your name because everyone's experience is different. But if you've reached this notebook, you've survived longer than most. The company wants you to think you're alone. You're not." Entry after entry followed. Fear, embarrassment, small victories, total exhaustion, rendered with unnerving honesty. One line stopped me cold. The contract isn't about pretending to be someone else. It's about discovering how much of yourself you've been hiding. I shut the notebook. "No," I said out loud to no one. The final pages had been torn out, the ending deliberately removed. Did they finish? Did they fail? I slid the notebook into my bag, anyway. The moment I stepped outside, my phone rang. Unknown number. "You weren't supposed to take that." I found it. It wasn't meant to be found. "Who wrote it?" Silence. "They completed their contract," he finally said. "So, where are they now?" "They moved on." "Moved on where?" "You'll understand eventually." The call ended, as always, before I could push further. The rhythm of it. The week that followed moved faster than expected, and something in me was quietly shifting. Routines that had felt impossible days earlier were becoming ordinary. Choosing an outfit no longer ate an hour. Crowded rooms no longer spiked my pulse. Small talk with strangers came easier. None of it was a magic transformation. It was repetition. One uncomfortable moment stacked on another, until discomfort simply wore itself smooth. Then came challenge 2. Public speaking, 500 people, 40 minutes. Absolutely not. Except my email already contained the slides, prepared, apparently, weeks earlier by a version of me I couldn't remember being. I rehearsed all morning and forgot my lines every time. Backstage, another speaker clocked my nerves. First big audience? I nodded. Here's a secret, they're all hoping you succeed. Nobody out there wants you to embarrass yourself. Such a simple thought, and I never once considered it. They called my name. I stepped out into rows of faces and froze for exactly 1 second. Then I remembered the notebook. The hardest battles aren't public, and instead of thinking don't mess up, I thought just tell one story. So I did. 40 minutes disappeared. Afterward, people lined up to thank me, not because the talk had been flawless, but because it had been honest. Walking home that night felt different, not dramatic, just lighter. Waiting inside my door. Another unmarked envelope, this one holding only a photograph. 6 people, all smiling, all dressed differently, all wearing the same silver bracelet I'd been given. One face circled in black ink. On the back. Only one of them reached the end. 5 had failed. 1 had made it. And the question that actually terrified me wasn't who the survivor was, it was what had happened to the other 5. Why, not who. I studied that photograph for a long time and found nothing. No date, no names, no identifiable landmarks behind the 6 of them on what looked like an office rooftop. Then my phone buzzed. Stop looking backward. Prepare for tomorrow. No sender, no reply option. I threw the phone onto the couch. I'm done taking orders. The next morning, instead of following the day's schedule, I went straight back to the office building where this had all started. The receptionist recognized me instantly. I need to see him. I'm afraid that's not possible. Then tell me his name. I'm afraid that's not possible. Does he even work here? I'm afraid that's not possible. I gave up and turned to leave. She added, quietly, unprompted, "You'll get farther asking why than asking who." Then she went back to typing as though nothing had happened. Why, not who? Maybe I'd been chasing the wrong mystery from the start. That afternoon's assignment felt almost restful by comparison. 4 hours volunteering at a community center. Kids running the halls, parents hauling boxes, tables being set for a fundraiser. An older woman handed me a clipboard. Welcome desk duty. I've never done this, I admitted. Neither had I the first time, she said. For a few hours I greeted people, answered questions, pointed families toward rooms. Unglamorous, ordinary work. Then a little girl walked up holding a drawing, all of us volunteering together, me included. I couldn't decide what color your jacket was, she confessed. I think you picked the right one, I told her, and she beamed and ran off. That small, unremarkable moment mattered more than the runway or the stage had. Nobody there cared about appearances. Everybody was simply helping. On the walk home, I realized hours had passed without me thinking about the contract once. I'd just lived. That night's envelope held a scorecard instead of a note. Confidence improved. Adaptability improved. Communication improved. Authenticity in progress. I sat with that last line a long time. Hadn't I been authentic the whole way through? Or had fear been quietly editing me for years? The opinions I swallowed, the opportunities one turned down, the effort I disguised as indifference because trying felt too exposed? Maybe authenticity wasn't the absence of change. Maybe it was finally dropping the performance of everything's fine. The next morning the progress bar had leapt from 3% to 28% overnight, with no dramatic event to explain it, just an ordinary day spent helping strangers. I finally understood. The contract wasn't scoring spectacle. It was scoring growth. That evening's call confirmed it. You noticed the percentage?
Yes.
I assumed the hard challenges counted most. They don't. Then what does? A pause. The moments no one is watching. No cameras, no audience, no applause. It's easy to become who you want others to see, he continued. It's much harder to become that person when nobody benefits from watching. For once, it sounded completely sincere. I still don't understand why you chose me. You'll ask that many more times. Eventually you'll stop. The line went dead. What I stopped trusting. Days later, organizing the closet, something fell from the top shelf, a small wooden box I'd never seen, holding a second bracelet, silver, badly scratched. nearly worn smooth. A folded note was tucked beside it, the handwriting matching the library notebook exactly. If you found this, you're closer than I ever was. Don't make my mistake. The second page held only 4 words. I stopped trusting myself. I read it over and over. Not the company. Not the contract. Not the rules. Whoever wrote this had survived nearly the whole year and still counted their own self-doubt as the real failure. I put the bracelet back carefully. The mystery had stopped being about finishing the contract. It had become about understanding how someone could get that far and still believe doubt had cost them everything. At work the next day, my manager called me in. "We've been discussing promotions. You've got the wrong person." She laughed. "That's exactly why you're on the list." She opened a folder, nearly 2 years of performance reviews, signed by 6 different department heads, all praising the same things: reliable, creative, calm under pressure, a natural leader. "They're not real," I said.
"They're signed," she said.
"Can I ask you something? Why do you keep acting surprised every time someone compliments you?" I had no answer. "You've earned your place here," she said. "Stop trying to convince yourself otherwise." That question followed me home. How many compliments had I waved off over the years? How many wins had I filed under luck? The town without mirrors. Waiting when I got there. Challenge 3. Travel alone. Destination revealed tomorrow. 3 days. A train ticket appeared in my mailbox the next morning with no further explanation. For hours later, I stepped off in a small coastal town I'd never been to, salt in the air, streets quiet. My hotel room was already booked. The receptionist handed me a sealed envelope along with a key. "Someone asked us to give you this." Of course they did. Inside, spend 1 full day without looking at your reflection. It sounded easy until I realized how many surfaces betray you without warning: mirrors, shop windows, phone screens, car glass. By lunch, I'd already caught myself flinching away from 3 near misses. But as the day went on, something shifted. Without constantly checking my own image, I noticed everything else instead: the ocean, overheard conversations, the shape of the buildings, even the texture of my own thoughts. Late in the afternoon, I wandered into a bookstore wedged between 2 cafes. The owner asked if I was looking for something specific. "Just browsing." "That's usually when people find what they need," he said. One title caught me immediately: "The Person You Think Everyone Sees." Someone had underlined a line inside: "Most people spend more time imagining how others judge them than others spend actually thinking about them." I stood there a while, recognizing exactly what I'd been doing for years: populating an audience out of thin air and performing for its imagined judgment, while the real strangers around me were simply absorbed in their own lives. I bought the book. "You seem happier than when you walked in," the cashier said. I hadn't noticed until she pointed it out. That evening I walked the beach at sunset, families laughing, kids chasing gulls, couples watching the water. Nobody sparing me a glance, not because I blended in, but because everyone was busy living their own version of the same moment. It felt strangely freeing. Back at the hotel, I'd made it the whole day, without a single mirror. The next morning, a sticky note was waiting on the bathroom glass anyway. Challenge complete. No cameras, no witnesses. And still, somehow, they knew. On the train home, I finally let myself ask the question I'd been circling for weeks. What if this had never been about appearance at all? What if girl mode was just the door, not the destination? By the time I reached my apartment, the counter read 42%. Almost halfway. Inside, a new envelope. No instructions, no score, just a key card printed with 3 words: Participant Archives. On the back, in that same elegant hand: "You're finally ready to learn why almost everyone quits." For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. I was afraid I already knew it. The archives. The card felt heavier than a slip of plastic should. The address it encoded led to a nondescript office building on the city's edge, dark except for a single lit floor. The doors unlocked as I approached. No receptionist, no guard, only silence. The elevator moved on its own, opening onto a corridor of identical metal doors, ending in a single room with a card reader. A soft click, and it opened onto rows of filing cabinets stretching farther than I could see. each one labeled not by name, but by year. This hadn't started with me. It had been running for decades. I opened folder after folder. Participant numbers instead of names, no photos, just outcomes. Progress 64%. Withdrawn. Reason. Fear of judgment remained stronger than desire for change. Progress 82%. Withdrawn. Reason. Continued seeking approval before acting. Progress 91%. Withdrawn. Reason. Could not separate personal identity from public opinion. Every file ended the same way, not failed, not expelled. Withdrawn. They'd chosen to leave. Then a cabinet marked completed. A single drawer. A single folder. Inside, not a report, but a letter handwritten. If you're reading this, then you're closer than I ever imagined someone else would be. The first thing you should know is that there was nothing special about me. I wasn't the smartest participant or the bravest. I simply reached the point where I stopped asking permission to become who I wanted to be. The contract doesn't teach confidence. It uncovers confidence that was already there, buried under years of fear. The clothes were never the lesson. They were just the fastest route out of your comfort zone. Everything after that is your choice. I lowered the page and stood there, unable to move, as every challenge finally clicked into place. Public speaking, travel, volunteering, the runway, the networking event, none of it had ever demanded I become someone else. It had only demanded I let go of the fear that had been quietly steering my life. "You finally understand," said a voice behind me. The man from the contract stood in the doorway, exactly as unchanged as ever. "Is this a psychological experiment?" "In a way. You manipulated my life. We created opportunities. You erased my identity."
No.
"We removed excuses." "That's your explanation?" "It's the truth." I stepped closer. "You changed documents." "Yes. You changed people's memories. Only the details necessary for the experience. We built a different life around you, so every day required courage instead of convenience." "I hated you," I said. "I know. I wanted to quit. I know. Half the time I thought I was losing my mind. I know." His expression never wavered. Then he asked the question I'd heard from him months earlier. "Did anyone reject you?" Silence. "Did anyone laugh at you?" Silence. "Were the fears as real as you believed?" I thought back through all of it, the runway, the auditorium, the ballroom, the coastal town, the welcome desk. Every disaster I'd imagined had turned, eventually, into just a memory. Not because things had gone perfectly, but because I'd survived every imperfect one of them. "Do you know why almost everyone quits?" he asked, walking toward the cabinets. "They get scared."
No.
"They get exhausted."
No.
"They stop believing the contract." He turned. "They realize the contract was never changing them. They realize they have to. And that's where most people leave, because blaming the contract is easier than taking responsibility." I looked around the archive at hundreds, maybe thousands, of people who'd reached that same fork and turned back. Only one hadn't. What happens at 100%? For once, he didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and produced another contract, blank, already signed, and set it on the table between us. "When you reach 100, he said quietly, "you'll decide whether someone else deserves the same opportunity." I stared at the blank page, my reflection faint in the polished tabletop. Months earlier, I would have looked away. This time I didn't, not because every insecurity had vanished, but because I finally recognized the person looking back. Not the version fear had shaped. Not the version built to satisfy everyone else.
Just me.
For the first time since I'd signed that impossible agreement, the contract stopped feeling like a cage and started feeling like a mirror. It had never really been about living in girl mode. It had been about finding the parts of myself that fear had locked away long before I ever picked up the pen. Live honestly. The notification came one last time. Contract progress. 100%. No fireworks, no fanfare, just a final line. Contract complete. Live honestly. The screen went dark. When I looked up, the man was gone. The archive empty, the hallway lights switching off one by one behind me as I walked toward the exit. Outside, the city looked exactly as it had the day I signed. Only one thing had actually changed.
Me.